So to find an appropriate branch for air layering, I don't want to have anything bigger than my finger. But I also want to find a branch, and I think this is pretty ideal, that has a lot of leaf structure on the top and then a nice empty, space below, because that's where I'm going to put the air layer. And what's going to happen is that the air layer is basically going to be the same as chopping this off, but actually what you're doing is keeping the internal phloem flowing. So all you're really doing is taking off the xylem. And by using a razor blade, you go into the branch only as deep as the first slimy layer you get, because that is the meristem, and that has cells that can be transformed into any other function other than just being the plumbing for this branch here. And so what we're going to try to do is, with the use of a hormone, and chemically it's called an auxin, and this is how it's bought at the store. I have a brand new jar for this, and it's a white powder, and this it's called Root Boost. This is often what we use for cuttings, because this will help, also transform. Even when you're chopping a plant, you're exposing the meristem, and once the meristem is dusted with this stuff, it can say, "Ooh, I think I'll be a root instead of a leaf." And so that's what I'm hoping to do, is to fool, well, not really fool, but I'm going to stop all the sugar that would be flowing back down to the roots by eliminating this outer layer of bark. But what's still happening is water is coming up through the center part of this branch. So we're still going to have a living plant, even though I've done this horribly destructive thing to the outside of this branch. It's still going to stay alive. And what's great about air layers is you can tell if they're working or not. Because an air layer, well, you'll see in a bit, but what I'm going to do is remove about an inch of branch material from an appropriate place like this, which is so great because it's actually underneath a forking or several forking branches. So all of the energy from these leaves are going to come down to this one spot here and hopefully be redirected by this to becoming roots. So I'm going to use a razor blade, and brought a brand new one of those too. But I did one thing to this before I started. I took this blade and I rubbed it very gently against a rock, because when these things come fresh from the store, they're just too sharp. And this will go through that meristem and then go into the part of the tree or the branch that you don't want. So there's two actually really cool branches here that are just right for air layering, but I think I'll take this slightly bigger one. And that means this will have to be kind of out of the way. Maybe you can poke it under here for the time being. And now we've got this whole exposed thing. And where I make my first cut, I'm going to try to find a bumpy place, because that's where you might have a concentration of meristem. And so I'm going to choose, I'll go down a little bit farther, because the air layer is going to take up, well, this will be the only part of the bark I remove right here. But the air layer will take up an area about like this. And I really want to be sure that water from rain doesn't seep into the air layer. So you'll see that I use this special stuff called parafilm, which makes it totally waterproof. It keeps all the moisture inside the air layer. And this will all make more sense once you see them. So I'll just go to work now, and I'll choose this bumpy place to make the top cut through, because the top cut is usually the one that makes all the roots. Now I'm going about an inch below that and doing the same thing. Just basically girdling this branch, but not going in so deep. And now here is the part that's so important. I'm going to just do one little line going down. And I never cut my thumbnail, So I'm going to try to peel off this one. Oh, how fantastic it's coming off. This is usually a sign that you've got a good promising plant for making a good air layer. Now I want to make sure I don't destroy the lower ring of branch material. You see how easily that's coming off right there?
Yeah.
So this is real. I didn't know to expect that or not, because if you don't see this, then you have no choice but to gouge into the branch, and it's kind of not as natural as this way. But this is wonderful because it's coming off just perfectly. And I'm already down to that slimy layer of meristem here. And now going from the bottom up, I might need another little cut here, but that comes right off, as does this and this. And now we have a not totally naked. On the back part of it here was one little piece, and I have blown air layers by just leaving one little sliver of green. And this all looks white to me right now, but there's still a possibility there's some incipient veins in there that might conduct. So I'm going to use the sharp edge of this and just gently scrape. So there's no chance that some other conducting vessel will step in and sort of reunite these two separated plants now, because these are two different plants now. I've just really destroyed the connection with the plumbing. I'm going to take advantage of that because this upper plant here is just going to be desperate for nutrition, because nothing's flowing down anymore. And that's where I'm going to use rooting hormone. And I apply this with a toothbrush because you really want to work this into this little underlayer up here, because the roots that form will come actually from this very wood and occupy all of the sphagnum moss, hopefully inhabiting it so much that we'll see the roots poking against the inside of the plastic that I'm going to surround the sphagnum moss with. Wow. So here I'm using some of this precious rooting hormone, and it's about $10 for a little jar of this, and it should be much less than that, because I'm sure this is something they can just manufacture so cheaply. It's just the packaging that you're paying for. I'm just making sure that there's every possibility that this hormone is now being on that exposed branch area. I always want to put the top of this back on. Thank you. How many times have I spilled over containers of rooting hormone? Okay, now comes the fun part, where I take this damp sphagnum moss, and this is stuff that we get through the internet from New Zealand, because there's a particularly long fibered form there, and you'll see why it's necessary to have these long fibers. But this stuff just soaks up so much water that you spend about 2 or 3 minutes just shaking the water out of this, because I want this to be damp, but I do not want it to be wet. And this is only one half of it, because I'm going to have 2 balls that I'm going to put together to completely cover that wound that I've just put in there. And that's about the right size for one half. And this sphagnum moss sometimes comes with little telephone poles in it and things to be picked out that might possibly poke through the plastic, but it's usually pretty well.
Did you say you ordered that?
Yeah, through Amazon.
Through Amazon?
Yeah, and it's probably $20 buys you enough for 2 months worth of air layering.
And you just add water?
Yeah, that's all. It comes as a this newest batch came as this flattened brick.
Oh.
And I mean, I just cannot believe how much I made. I was going to, psych so twice as much as I ultimately did, and it already made too much. So I'm glad I saved some for I can use back at Waimea. And sorry, my pants are falling down. Now, before I put this on the tree, I'm going to make sure that my plastic covering for the air layer is ready. And I do have one pre-cut one in here. What I do is I start off with a freezer bag. That's got the thicker plastic that we want for this. And I make one cut up here, one cut right at the lowest part of this white labeling part. And then I can end up with 3 of these rectangles. And here's one I just cut this morning. So here's a nice rectangle about the right size for this air layer. And so this and this. And I'm going to have ready a bit of the wire that I need. And this is the one thing that I'm not sure I'm going to have a forever supply of. Because this is old telephone wiring that they don't make anymore.
Okay.
But there must be 100 fibers right in. And I've got still about a 20-yard roll of this stuff. So I'm good for a few more years at least. So I'm ready to do the big thing now. And I'm going to just hold this in my mouth. And once I put the 2 sphagnum moss balls, snowballs I call them, on both sides of the wound, then I'm going to wrap this around them both. And the first place I'm going to apply this wire is at the bottom part of it. But there's a technique for applying pressure to this, because I want this to be really tight against that branch. And then the worst thing that can happen is water getting into this after it's hermetically sealed. So I think I'm ready now. So I'm putting that very tightly around this. And then look how I'm holding this plastic. I'm just doing a C there, and with this hand, I'm pulling that really tightly. And then even though it's a little off center, it's still good. And the first one I'm going to apply the wire to is this bottom one. So I'm poking the loose sphagnum up. Yeah, come closer if you want to get a better look at this. Okay. It's still a little bit higher than I want it to be, but that's okay. See, what I'm going to do now is turn this and close it around the base. And that's where I'm going to very carefully apply this wire. And so once I've got this on, I'm going to use kind of a tourniquet method of tightening it. So I can take one more wrap around, and then I've got 2 of these purple wire ends, and I will just twist them together very tightly. And I don't think I left myself enough free wire, so I'm going to go back one. But I can see all parts of the lower part of this are within the plastic. I'm going to do this one more time. See, what I just did is I dropped the plastic a little bit, so now I got a little more play down here with the loose plastic. One, two, and three, I think I can do. And this looks really good. So this is really, really tight, and it's covering every bit of the circumference of this branch, except I just blew it by yanking the wrong end. But I can get back to the right place here. Now, Robert, you might want to come in and get a close up of where this plastic is and where the tightening part is. So that is now completely around here. I guess you can, now I'm going to do the same thing to the top. But that wound that I made is completely covered by this sphagnum moss. And so I'm going to get another wire. That was going to be really cool and just bite it off. And that's not cool because I got two. Okay, one, same thing again. So I'm actually pulling the corner of the plastic to make it tight. Got something to hold on to there I didn't before. I'm air layering so many things at Waimea now that I'm devoting a special calendar. And it takes about 2 months for an air layer to fill up with roots. So a lot of my January air layers now are coming ready to pot up. So I think I've made that as tight as possible. And now I'm going to just pull it around. And see how there's some extra plastic here? I'm going to use the razor blade to remove that because I'm about to apply the parafilm, which is the stuff that really makes this hermetically sealed. This makes me think I just dulled my life a little too much. Yeah, that's a little better. This one at the top here, yeah, I'll take a little off. So this parafilm, which comes in a roll like this, but I've already cut appropriate sized pieces to use. And a lot of these look kind of small, but there's a good group of them. So this parafilm is a weird thing. I think it's a combination of wax and plastic that is just like right next to a piece of paper. So I've always made these into sharp points, and I can pinch the corner, and then just holding on to that point, I can peel the paper off. And now this stuff has the most amazing ability to conform to almost any shape. Now you see I put these wires around clockwise, no, counterclockwise. And that's the way I'm going to apply this. So I'm holding a little bit of it to get it started. And then once I have it, see it stretches out about another inch every time you pull it out. So you can get all the way down to the bottom where not a bit of moisture is going to get in there. And I'm going to do this a second time, maybe even a third, just to be sure that it's really tight in here. But this top one is the most important, because the top one is where rain's going to try to drip into it.
And where do you get that parafilm?
Order it online.
Same.
Yeah. I think we've actually got the place where you can get it from printed on the things. Let's see. Here's the more of this stuff. Would we have time for me to do a second branch on this?
Probably not, David.
Okay.
If we do a walk to the point out there,
Yeah, all right.
we're about 20 minutes from wanting to hit that.
Okay. Yeah, because I still got about 5 or 10 minutes of this thing. I'm going to put a second piece of parafilm on each one of these, just to be sure that it's airtight. Watertight, really. Well, airtight too, because the humidity in here is what I want to preserve for the whole 2 months. But I sure don't want it to get waterlogged or soaked, because if you come back and you find this air layer like a week or two from now and it's just all sogging, and I squeeze it and I can see the water's moving around inside, then I've blown it. And those roots will drown.
That happens when you start over?
Yeah, but usually with a different branch. Now I'm going to put one more strip up here. And before each pull, I'm pulling it a little bit, so it's going to be tight against itself. But I do want it to stick. This is where the plastic part of it kind of makes it into the right shape. Now, that's not the end of it. I always put an umbrella on my, and I usually save the part of the bag that has the writing on it for this umbrella, but I don't see it now. Huh, did I? Yeah, remember when I brought this out, I had it attached. Here it is. Some people will cover their air layers with silver foil, and roots want to grow in darkness. But how can you check silver foil? You have to peel it off and look underneath and then put it back. The thing also about silver foil is that bulbuls and certain birds want to get that stuff for their nests, so they take it apart. So I've always found plastic good enough. But I'm going to now make an umbrella since the rain's going to be falling here, I'm really going to hermetically seal at the top of this thing. And this time I'm going to use a different technique of just rolling the plastic until I have it tight against the branch. And then I can still put a piece of wire around it like I just had. Yeah, and if I were a better horticulturist than I have been so far, I would have used a flame before even touching the, I would have sterilized my blade. Just didn't think of that back then. So now I've sealed the top part of this. It's not going to go all the way around, but now I can pretty much do the same thing to the bottom part of this. And I'm going to twist this around this way so it's protected from the rain. And I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom. Just rolling it up. Using 2 wires there, but that's okay. Okay, that is pretty tight. Now this top one, I'm going to reinforce with some more parafilm, just so the water doesn't drip along the trunk of the branch down into the sphagnum moss, because I hate to find these things waterlogged. It's just a whole lot of work for nothing, and you got to start all over again. So this is just to protect the 1 or 2 drops that might try to seep in through this top area here, and then it'll get to another barrier below it, and chances are it won't get into the sphagnum moss. But no guarantee. So there is the almost finished air layer. The one thing I still have to do is date this. And we have some special, we call these air layering flags.
Oh, the date you said?
Yeah. So I'm going to write on here 3/22/25. And if we were in my botanical garden, I would write its accession number. But I'll just write Olopua. No, I don't. Is that what I want to say? No. What's, yeah. Say again.
Mokiana?
Mokihana. Mokihana.
Yeah, Moki.
The Hana part means home?
Work, normally.
Hana means work, Hana means home.
Oh,
So hopefully this will keep people that would be potential vandals.
We're also telling the public what this plant is, unfortunately. So we could choose to leave this off if you want.
No, I think, this is part of what we're doing here is
Okay.
to establish the connectivity.
Anyway, there's the completed air layer. That's all we can do.
Bravissimo!
And I do this probably twice a day at Waimea for all sorts of plants. But there's so many plants that will just grow as cuttings on their own. This is only a few members of every hibiscus will grow from cuttings.